So let's go ahead and start. As Wendy said, you can ask questions anytime. You can go to the Q&A section, and I will try to answer every single question that we have for you. Now, by the end of the training, we're going to give you a file that contains a few links. As you know, this is only a 3-hour webinar, and we show you some basics. But if you want to go deeper, then you can just go to the file we're going to give you, and then you can click on any of the links that we have here for you. I have the links created here by module, and now Wendy just shared the file with you, so you can just get the file from the chat, and you can go deeper on any of the links I have here for you. Again, we go and we have the links by module. For example, here we have a few on module 1. So what's AWS, the regions and AZs, what's an outpost as well. I will give you many details, but again, if you want to go deeper, you can just open that file anytime, and you can just click on any of those links. Okay, so let's go and start with the discovery day. It might take around 3 hours, I might say. So we should be able to finish around like 2 p.m. Central. Let's see how far we can go and how fast we can go and how many questions we have. But we are expecting to finish by 2 p.m. Okay, so let's go and start about cloud. So the discovery day, it's just to show you some basics about cloud. And then if you want to go deeper, if you want to learn more, we have a few trainings for you that you can take anytime with QuickStart, and you can enroll anytime. We have a few discounts and a few promotions that I will show you in a few moments. But let's go ahead and start with the discovery day, and let's talk about the cloud. Okay, so let's go and start with module 1. Let's talk about the agenda. So we're going to see what's the cloud, how it works, and then we see benefits of AWS. Okay, we don't talk about any other clouds. We show you many features and use cases on some of the AWS solutions, but we don't compare with any other clouds. Okay, so before cloud computing came out, it was kind of challenging to identify the maximum peaks, the resource capacity, the storage, and many other things that we used to have only on-prem. Okay, when we say on-prem, that means your own data center, right? Many customers are going now with cloud. I know many customers that they have a hybrid cloud. That means they have on-prem and cloud, and they move things back and forth between both places. And I know customers that they have cloud only. Okay, so if you go with cloud, we have a few benefits that we're going to talk about in a few moments. So if we go and see the basics of the AWS cloud, you can request resources anytime. You have to pay for them, right? But you don't have to pay for the entire server or the entire storage, or you don't have to pay for power, cooling, right? So there are a few interesting benefits, many, but we have a few interesting benefits for you so you can start using the cloud. And the most important thing about using the cloud is that you pay only for what you're using. If you deploy a few VMs, then you pay only for those VMs, and you don't need to pay for all the resources that you might not be using at that moment. Okay, now AWS, and let me go and type a few notes here on the screen. When I say VMs, because most of you know VMs, right? But on AWS, they call them EC2 instances. Okay, we're going to see more details about EC2, but that's just to give you some details. And again, since most of you know VMs, the name they use within AWS, it's an EC2 instance. So you can deploy, for example, an EC2 instance with, I don't know, let's say Windows 2019, and you can start paying by the hour for that instance. So you don't need to buy the server. You are paying for just a portion of the license, and you can pay by the hour for that EC2 instance or that VM of Windows 2019. Okay, so you need more Windows servers. You can deploy more, as many as you want. There is no maximum. Of course, you have to pay for those servers once you start deploying them. And once again, you can pay by the hour. And some features, they they charge AWS, they will charge you by the second. Okay, so there is a huge difference if you buy systems, if you need a data center, if you buy some racks, if you need all the power and cooling and all those details that most of you know from on-prem. And when you go to cloud, you get all those resources from the cloud and you pay only for a fraction. That's why here it says no large upfront investments. Okay. Again, anytime you have any questions, go to the Q&A section and then I can answer any of your questions. So when we talk about cloud computing, we have many components. In fact, AWS, as of today, they have more than 200 services, okay? A few of them are the ones that we show you here: servers, storage, databases, applications, and once again, many more. And they keep adding more and more services every single month. So it's interesting to see all the services. It might be challenging to keep up to date, right? But if you start using the console, if you go to the official channels as well, you can get many details and you can see all the updates that they do almost every single week. Okay, so as I mentioned before, you can go with only on-prem. You can buy some things from AWS. So you can go and you can deploy a few servers on-prem with the discounts that you get from AWS. And that, by the way, and there's a link on the file that we just gave you, it's called AWS Outpost. Okay, so you can buy things for on-prem. Okay, now, if you want to, you can go with a hybrid cloud. That means you have on-prem and cloud. Okay, not many customers, they go with cloud only. And I know, once again, many customers that they have a hybrid cloud, again, on-prem and cloud, and they have like 30, 70 or 60-40 or 50-50, right? It depends how far and the applications and the use cases that your company needs. And of course, you can go with cloud only as well. Okay, let me go to the Q&A section here. What does on-prem means? The traditional data center that your company has. So when we have we work for a big company, they have a traditional, let me type it here, traditional data center, okay? And that's maintained by your company, okay? So if you have a site and you have a few servers and a few racks on that site, that's called on-prem, okay? What you have inside your company, or it might be a colocation site as well. Okay, so that's the meaning of on-prem. Okay, does that make sense, Nassim? Okay, so that's the meaning of on-prem. Now, again, you can keep your on-prem systems and servers and racks and cables and everything you need, and you can start using the cloud. What's the huge difference? When you have an on-prem site, a data center, again, you have to pay for many things, right? You have to pay for all the things needed, and also you have to pay for support, and you have to pay for redundancy, HA, and many more things that we're gonna see in just a few moments, okay? But that's the meaning of on-prem. Hybrid means on-prem and cloud, and then also you can go with a cloud-only strategy as well, okay? Now, benefits of AWS, you can see a few benefits of using AWS. It's elastic. Get used to that word, to that concept, because it's a very important concept. That means that you can request more resources anytime. You can decrease that number of resources anytime as well. You are going to get cost savings, and we can do a rapid deployment. I will give you a demo. I will show you how we can deploy a VM in 2-3 minutes. And you can start using that VM. Again, we call that EC2. So I will show you how we can do that. But trust me, with just a few clicks, or using the CLI, or using APIs, or using the console, you can deploy resources very, very fast. Okay. When we say APIs, usually we mean automation, right? And you can deploy resources so fast and so easy. And once again, it will be cost effective. Okay, but those are benefits of using the cloud. So let's go and start with the first one. You can see they have a faster innovation. You don't have to wait for additional resources. If you want to deploy an EC2 instance, you can do that again anytime. If you want to deploy a database, a firewall, um, um, a share, an export, you can do that right away, and they will give you access right away. But of course, once again, you have to start paying for that on a hourly, weekly, or on a monthly basis as well. You can experiment, and they will have innovation. That means that they have the most updated servers, racks, NICs, HBAs. So everything is up to date, and they take care of many things. So the next one we have here is once again elasticity. So that means that they can adapt to different workloads. For example, let's say you have an online store, right? And the store, it works 24 hours, okay? At some point, you're gonna have some peaks, right? And let's say that the peaks, they go from, let's say 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. So from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., you can increase the resources for the online store. And then at 10 p.m., you can go back to the ones that you had before. And if you know you're going to have let's say a promo from, let's say 6 p.m. to midnight, right? Then you can increase the resources at 6 p.m. and you can go back to the ones you had at 12 a.m. Or you can do that by day as well. You can say, you know what, we know that the customers, they buy more on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. You can increase the resources at that moment, and you don't pay for those resources if you don't need them at that moment. We can also distribute workloads across multiple resources, and they deploy fault-tolerant applications and resources as well. Okay, I will give you a few more details about elasticity once we get to module 2. The next one, cost savings, right? You can trade the capital expense for variable expense. You don't need to pay for any maintenance costs either. And once again, the most interesting thing about cloud is that you pay as you go. Of course, you can get more discounts based on the commitment. If you say, for example, that you need that Windows 2019 EC2 for, let's say, 2-3 years, you can sign the contract and they will give you additional discounts. Okay, but you can start paying by the hour, by the minute, and usually they charge you on a monthly basis. Now, when we talk about cost savings, it's important to mention that AWS has something called the free tier, and you get the free tier for 12 months. That means that they give you the option to try and practice and learn AWS without paying 1 cent. Okay, I gave you a link on the file that takes you to the free tier. It shows you all the things that you can do with the free tier. Of course, you won't be able to deploy a huge server or a big database. They give you like the light version, let's say, usually based on capacity or time as well, but you can try AWS. The only thing that you need, it's an email address, a credit card, right? Again, if you follow the guidelines of the free tier, you pay nothing for 12 months, okay? If you deploy, let's say 5 EC2 instances, of course you have to pay for those 5 EC2 instances. But for example, on EC2, they give you 1 instance per month, and that will be completely free if you choose the correct instance type, okay? But once again, you get access to the free tier for 12 months, okay? If you're interested, go to the file. There's a link so you can sign up, and then you can access the free tier. Now, the next one we have is rapid deployments. We have a highly scalable platform worldwide. AWS has more than 25 let's say regions worldwide, and within those regions they have multiple sites that I will give you a few more details on that in just a few moments. They have a quick release for new features in applications. and they have an automated deployment. You can choose how automated you want to go. You can do the process manually, or you can go and you can start using automation as well. Okay. So as you can see here, now let's go and talk about all the regions that they have. As you can see, they have more than 25 regions. They have 26 regions, to be exact. They have 26 regions right now. They are expecting a few more this year. But as you can see, they have regions on every single continent. You can see they have in the US, of course, they have US East, US West. They have a few in Europe, in the Middle East as well, okay, Japan. And I also gave you a link so you can see all the locations they have worldwide. Okay, now let's talk about regions. A region is a geographical location with multiple locations that are isolated from each other. Supports the AWS global footprint. It serves the customers across the world, and they have a fast-paced expansion with a long-term commitment with the customers, with the country, and with everyone that needs the resource there. For example, let me go back here. If you are located in the East Coast, for example, then it should be way better if you go with the US East region. If you are located in the West Coast, go with US West, and they have two in US West. If you work for the government, they have specific, let's say, geographies, specific locations for the US government. For example, they have US West and they have US East as well. If you're located in India, they have one location in Mumbai. If you're located in Japan, they have Osaka and Tokyo. If you're located in Australia, okay, they have Sydney as well. So they try to have regions close to the end users. Now, besides the regions, they have something called edge locations. And they have way more edge locations than regions. And those edge locations, that's like a, let's say, like a shortcut, like a, let's say, like a proxy to AWS. So even though, now let me go back here, even though I showed you some regions, some of you might say, so what happens in Africa? What happens in Central South America? They have edge locations that we don't show you here, and that's going to be a faster way so you can connect to the AWS, let's say, network that they have worldwide. Okay, now let's go and see a few more details about the regions. On every single region, they have something called AZs, okay? That's a logical site, okay, that might contain multiple physical sites, and that's the way they can guarantee that if one site goes down, if one rack goes down, if something happens to, I don't know, a floor, a building, you can still access your resources. The AZs are connected through high bandwidth, low latency network over fully redundant and dedicated fiber, and it helps the customers to build highly available applications as well. Usually, and most of the regions, okay, let me type here, most of the regions, they have at least 3 AZs. That means they have at least 3 logical websites within that region. They have a distance between those AZs, but they have a low latency connection, and that's why it appears to be like one huge, big data center, but in fact are multiple sites, multiple physical sites within the same region. Okay, so power can fail on one, something might happen on that side, and then they have multiple sites, so they can guarantee that you can access your data, your service, your database, your VM, or whatever you have deployed in the public cloud. Now, as I mentioned before, they have the edge locations. They have regional cache servers as well, so they can deliver content to customers throughout the worldwide network. And they have a low latency and a high transfer speed on those edge locations. Okay. Now, let me go forward here. Let me switch to my browser so I can show you more details about the edge locations. Give me 1 second here. I thought I had that link open. Okay, let me go and share my screen here with you. So you can see, and that's one of the links I gave you on the file. So you can see here the regions, right? You can see also the details about the AC, right? They have local zones, okay? They have the outpost as well, some things I mentioned. And then if you go back to the map here, they show you the regions and they show you the edge locations as well. So you can see they have more edge locations than regions. If I go to, for example, I don't know, let's say Asia Pacific, it shows you the regions. Those are the yellow ones, and they show you the edge locations. And that's the way that you can get to the AWS network on a fast and a very easy way, if that's closer to your location. If we click on, let's say now, Europe and Middle East, you can see all the edge locations they have. For example, Spain, they don't have a region in Spain, but they have an edge location. And if we click now on the South America, they show you here the edge locations. They have one region in Brazil, but they have more edge locations, so you can connect your site, your data, your database, your VPN into the AWS network. Okay. Okay, let me go back to PowerPoint. We're almost done with module 1, by the way. So the key takeaways about using cloud, you can see some of the interesting benefits. They have way more. I will show you way more once we get to the next lecture. But these are the benefits of using AWS. Anyone has any questions so far?
Yep, and just as a reminder, you can type them in that Q&A panel on your Zoom window.
Okay, thanks, Wendy. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with module 2. Now we're going to go deeper. We're going to see more interesting details and solutions. So let me open the second lecture. And now let me go and share my screen here with you. Okay, so let's go and see an overview of some AWS services. As I mentioned before, AWS has more than 200 services. So there is no time, we don't have enough time to show you those 200 services. We show you the most significant or the most common services that the customers they use, right? So let's go and start with the compute. Then we go to storage. Then we go with database, and then we continue with networking and content delivery. Okay, so let's go and start with compute. Okay, when we start with compute, that means that besides the EC2 that I explained you a few moments ago, you can go and you can do many more things. For example, let's go and start with EC2. EC2 means Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud. That's why they abbreviate with EC2. Okay, that's what EC2 stands for. Now, they also have EC2 autoscaling. I will give you some details on autoscaling in a few moments. They have elastic load balancing, ECS for containers. Many customers are using now containers like Docker, for example, for applications. And then you can go with something called Lambda. Lambda, it's one of the features that we have for serverless. We're going to see what serverless in a few moments. Okay, so let's go and start with EC2. So EC2, it's like a VM, right? As I mentioned before, it's like a VM that you can deploy within AWS. Okay, so you can boot a server in just a few minutes with just a few clicks. You can scale the capacity up and down as your computing requirements change, and they have multiple pricing options so you can minimize the cost. If you go to the console and you deploy an EC2 instance, you are going to pay by the hour. Okay, unless it's a Linux EC2. If you deploy at Linux EC2, you pay by the minute, okay? Any other EC2 instance, you pay by the hour, okay? If you go with the pay as you go model, okay? Now, let me show you a few more details on EC2. Because on EC2, you have multiple ways to buy or to pay for that VM. You can go with an on-demand instance. That's something you can do from, you can deploy from the console or APIs or from the CLI as well. You can go with something called spot instances, or you can go with a reserved instance. When we say on-demand instances, that's what I was saying before. Let me just get that back here. Okay, you are going to pay by the hour or by the minute. Okay, now spot instances, that's something that you can pay and you can buy and you can start using EC2, and that will give you around an 80 to 90% discount from on-demand instances. Okay, now why do we have to be careful with spot instances? Because that spot instance, it's using the unused AWS EC2 capacity, okay? And since it's not being used, then they give you access to that capacity, but they give you a 2-minute warning. If they need that capacity, they give you a warning and they can stop that instance for you at that moment. So that's for data mining, maybe creating reports, something that can be temporary, okay, not for your application, not for your database, not for let's say a production environment, but spot instances, they can give you some discounts versus on-demand instances. And reserved instances, you can go and you can say, you know what, I need a 1 year, I have a 1 year commitment, or let's say a 3-year commitment, and I want to buy that instance for 3 years. Now, what happens when you do the commitment of 3 years? You pay for 3 years, and you have many ways to pay. You can pay upfront, you can pay monthly, you can pay a few bucks, let's say, when you start using the instance, and then you pay the rest in the next 3 years. But for example, you have now the commitment of 3 years. If you stop using that instance, that becomes unused capacity. And AWS, they make that capacity available for other customers. But once again, they might stop that instance anytime and they give you a 2-minute warning. Okay, now, let me show you how easy it's, how easy can we deploy an EC2 instance. So let me go to my console. Let me open my browser. Let me go to my console here. And the console, by the way, it's very easy to use. And as I mentioned before, go and check the free tier. They give you many features that you can try without paying for. And now, if I go to the search navigation bar and I type EC2, I can just go and click on EC2, and then it will take me to the EC2 dashboard. Of course, right now I have no instances running, right? If I want to, I can just go and start, I can launch one instance. And as you can see, some of them, they show you the free tier. For example, Amazon Linux 2 AMI. Now, what's an AMI? An AMI, or AMI, stands for Amazon Machine Image, and that's like a VM template, okay? So let me go and type it here. It's like a VM template, okay? So they have multiple templates, so you can deploy a VM. You can customize, of course, but the OS, the service packs, the patches, they have that as an AMI. Now, you can create your own AMIs if you want, okay? Or you can go to the marketplace. Now, before I go to the marketplace, let me show you some EC2 instances that you can deploy in just a few clicks. They have Linux, right? They have Mac OS as well. You can see they have Big Sur, they have many options. You can go with Red Hat as well. And of course, you can go with Windows. Now, let me type here Windows. And you can get a Windows 2019 server in 2-3 minutes. Or you can get a Windows 2019 with containers, or a 2019 with SQL 2017 as well. And as you can see here, you can deploy the Windows 2019. That applies, it's a free tier eligible. But for example, the Microsoft Windows 2019 with SQL Server, it's not on the free tier. Then you have to start paying for that EC2 instance. Or you can go with Microsoft SQL 2019 standard enterprise as well, and they have many AMIs. So let me go and choose the Windows 2019 here. Let me go and select. It will show you all the instance types that they have. Now, what's the instance type? The instance type will give you resources for that VM based on that type. For example, if you go with a T2, let me zoom in so you can see that. If I go with a T2 Nano, right, they give you 1 vCPU and 0.5 gigs of memory. If I go with the free tier one, they give you 1 vCPU and 1 gig of memory. Now, that's so you can practice, right? So I can deploy that VM for 12 months and I don't pay for that VM. Now, how far do you want to go? Do you need more resources? Yes, of course. If I have if I need a production VM, right, or EC2 instance, I need more resources. So the one we have here, that's going to be vCPUs, and then we have memory. So let's keep going. Let's go all the way down. And as you can see, they can give you, for example, here 96 vCPUs and 192 gigs of memory. If I keep going, you can get more. We go all the way down here. They used to give like 3. We keep going here. For example, here 128 vCPUs and 256 gigs of memory. That's if you go with the C6i 32X large. And then if I keep going here, at some point, you can get 768 gigs of memory or 976 gigs of memory. And you can deploy that anytime, and you can access that VM right away. So let me go back to, all the way back to the free tier. Just click on the instance details. I can choose a few details about the EC2 instance, okay? And then I might need to create a few things so I can deploy my EC2 instance. But trust me, it takes 2-3 minutes so you can deploy that EC2 instance. Now, some things I want to show you, and let me go back to EC2. So you can deploy many VMs or EC2 instances with a different OS. But if I go now to the marketplace, many vendors, they have their own solutions within the cloud. For example, Trend Micro or Cisco, Splunk, Trend, OpenVPN as well. And you can see they have more than 5,000 solutions. For example, if I go and I type here, let's say Cisco, you can deploy a virtual appliance, you can deploy a virtual switch as well. Okay, so many vendors, they have their own solutions deployed on the marketplace, and you can deploy them anytime. And you can start using those instances and you pay by the hour or by the minute. Any questions, anyone so far? Okay. So let's go back to PowerPoint. And now let's talk about autoscale. Okay. So when we go and we talk about autoscaling, that means that we can add, not we configure an autoscaling policy, and then AWS can add or can remove instances according to the conditions you define, so we can keep the application up and running. We can benefit from dynamic or predictive scaling. What's the difference between both of them? Dynamic means that we can define, for example, let's say once again we have a website, or let's say we have an online store, right? And right now we have one EC2 instance, okay? Now, when we get some peaks, at some point we get more customers, we can say, you know what? The minimum number of EC2 instances that I need, it's 1. The maximum, it will be 4. And if it's needed, if my EC2 instance that we have right now, it's getting, let's say, CPU at 95% and memory, I don't know, let's say also, I'm sorry about that. Memory, it's around, let's say, 85%, right? AWS can deploy another instance for you, and it can load balance the traffic between both instances, okay? So when we go with auto scaling, we have to say minimum desired capacity and what's the maximum capacity. For example, I can say desired, it's going to be 2. That should be the best way to go. Minimum, I need 1 when we have nothing going on. We have no requests, we have no customers, and the maximum can be 4. You have to define a maximum because, for example, if we say maximum and we don't define a maximum, it can get more and more and more EC2 instances. And then at the end of the month, you're going to see that you have to pay a lot of money. Okay, so always we define a maximum number of EC2 instances. Now I can say, for example, desired 4, minimum 2, maximum 10. And the cloud can deploy those 6 additional EC2 instances, so your online store can keep all the requests and can stay up and running. That's what they do for Amazon. When you buy on Amazon, they know the peaks. Christmas, New Year's Eve, right? Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, they know people will be buying more. So instead of over provisioning resources for 12 months, they just go and add more resources when they need to. And if they don't need them anymore, they can go back to, let's say, 1, 2 EC2 instances for that specific service. Okay. So AWS, by the way, it was created to support the Amazon store. Okay, they support the Amazon. So imagine if they can support Amazon, right? They can support almost any customer. In fact, I can say they can support now with all the technology and all the assets they have. They can support any customer worldwide. Now, some interesting customers that AWS has, for example, one of the most interesting ones, and I think all of you know that customer, it's Uber, right? Um, and another interesting, Netflix. All the movies, all the series, everything they have, it's hosted on AWS. So if you request an episode and you want to see that episode in India, for example, they give you that episode and they move that data closer to you so you don't get any latency issues. If you want to open your movie on a phone, they change the format and then you can see the movie on your phone. Or if you go to your tablet, then they change the format so you can see that on your tablet or on a Mac or on a Windows server or on a TV, right? So they have huge, huge customers. And for example, Netflix, right? How many copies of the same episode do we need? Well, it depends. When the episode comes out, they need many copies worldwide so everyone can see the same episode. And they can see that episode with no latency, right? So you don't have to wait for it. And that's why they almost never fail, right? Because when they announce a new movie, right, they deploy many resources. They use auto scaling so they can deploy many EC2 instances so they can support all the load for that specific moment. Any questions, anyone so far? Okay, now Let's keep going with EC2. So we can add new instances only when necessary. We can remove, the cloud can remove those instances when traffic is low. And once again, you pay only for what you use. So that means that you don't pay for that auto scaling feature. You pay for the number of instances that you are running when you need more, or if you don't need them anymore, you're going to pay less if you keep only 1 or 2 instances running. Okay, so that's one of the features that you don't have to pay for. Okay, but again, you have to pay for the resources that we are going to deploy based on your auto scaling policy. Okay, so let's go and see an example here, and let's say this is your online store once again, and you can see that on Wednesdays you have let's say you have more customers than any other day of the week. Okay, so if you go with an on-prem, let's compare cloud with on-prem. Okay, so let's go with on-prem here. If you have an on-prem data center, right, you need to pay for and you need to buy enough resources so you can handle all the peaks we have for that online store, right? So you need to over provision for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday as well. Okay. On Sunday, for example, we have not many customers, not many requests here. And if you go with on-prem, you are paying for all the resources needed just in case you have a peak. But with cloud, you can say, you know what, on Sundays, we pay only for 1 EC2 instance. On Monday, we pay for 2. On Wednesday, we pay for 3. Or Tuesday, we pay for 3. On Wednesday, we pay for 8, for example. And then on Thursday, we pay for 6. And then Friday, we pay 4. And then Saturday, we pay only 2. That's flexible, and that's auto-scaling. Auto-scaling, it's part of the elastic. It's one of the elastic features that you can get from the cloud. Okay, so auto-scaling, it's elastic. Okay, that's one of the elastic features that you get from AWS. Okay. Okay, so as you can see here, and as I was saying before, you have to specify for the auto scaling group, you have to specify the minimum, desired, and maximum. Okay, and then we can scale out as needed. For example, once again, if you are going to, let's say, sell a new book or a new movie or a new episode, then at that moment, we can start doing scaling. Now, we can do the scaling when it's needed or before it's needed. For example, if you know that let's say the episode will be released at 10 a.m., we can do the auto scaling at 9:45 a.m. So at 10 a.m., everything's ready, okay? Or if we start getting many requests at 10 a.m., we can start scaling at that moment. It might take some time to get to the maximum, right? So it might be easier to pre-set up, right? So we can do the setup before it's needed. And that's something that you can configure on your scaling, okay? That's one of the features we have and we can get from the cloud. Now, let's go with another elastic feature, and let's talk about load balancing. Load balancing can distribute traffic across multiple resources. It acts as a single point of contact for your auto-scaling group and distributes traffic across multiple ACs. Let me show you, we have an example here on elastic load balancing. So let's say we have a low demand period, right? And we have to, let's say this is my EC2, oops, let me type here, EC2 1, we have an EC2 instance 2, and we have a load balancer, okay? And the load balancer will distribute traffic to both EC2 instances based on the requests that we get from the end users. Now, when we get more demand, okay, we get more requests to the same load balancer, okay, instead of moving the traffic only to 2 instances as we had before, we are going to deploy 2 more, and then it can load balance the traffic on those 4 instances. So every single instance can be, for example, at 50% when we distribute the traffic on those multiple instances, okay? So now you can see 2 things that can be elastic, right? We have the load balancer, and then we have the EC2 instances that we can deploy when it's needed the most, okay? So when we go with load balancers, we can go with an application load balancer. That's the way we can balance HTTP or HTTPS traffic. It goes and it operates at the layer 7. Maybe some of you remember OSI, right? It can route traffic based on the content of the request as well. And it can be based on traffic, it can be based on the request. So let me show you here another example, now using an application load balancer. So let's say we have here an end user on the left, right? They are connected to the application load balancer. And then we have an EC2 instance that has multiple, let's say, volumes, so they can save images or data or APIs. So for example, when you go with the application load balancer and we get, for example, an image from the end user, that image goes to the application load balancer, and then based on the type of request, the image can be sent to a specific volume of that EC2 instance, okay? Or it can be to a specific EC2 instance. Here we only have 1 instance, but if you have multiple instances, you can say my EC2 1 is going to be for images. My EC2-2 will be for APIs, and my EC2-3 will be for data. And the application load balancer can send those requests to different instances or different volumes we have within the instance. So it can be based on traffic, but it can also be based on the type of request as well. Okay, if we get now, for example, let's say we get a file 1, okay, .txt, that's not an image. So the application load balancer knows that, so it sends that file to that EC2-3 or that volume we have on that EC2 instance as well. Okay, so you only configure the application load balancer. Of course, we have to configure the EC2 instance, but you can do things very easy and very fast. And once again, right now, if you deploy the application load balancer, of course, you have to pay for the load balancer, right? You have to pay for the EC2 instance as well, and you have to pay for the storage that we have within the EC2 instance. But trust me, it's way cheaper than having an F5 on-prem, having let's say a Linux server on-prem, and paying for support, licenses, power, cooling, and everything that we need to keep up and running an on-prem site, okay? Now, let's go with something called ECS. You can see we have another service that starts with Elastic. And ECS, that's the way that we can, let's say, orchestrate your containers, okay? If you don't know what's a container, don't worry about that. It's getting bigger and better. Many customers are using now containers. And usually when we talk about containers, okay, that means that we are, let's say, using the containers for applications. Okay, imagine the containers, you know, for the ones that you can use to move your, I don't know, products from Asia to the US, the ship containers, right? So any of those containers, imagine that container, and when you create an application, that application can go within a container with all the things needed to run the application. And when you create a container for your application and you add all the dependencies and all the libraries and all the things needed, you can run your application anywhere using that container. So nowadays, customers are using containers. Many customers are using containers, and some of them, they are using VMs and containers. Okay, so again, some customers, they go with containers only, some customers with VMs only, like VMware, right, Hyper-V, and some other ones, they are using both of them at the same time. So you can run, once again, an application anywhere at any time. Now, if you're using containers and you need to orchestrate your containers, you can do that with ECS. Okay, you can scale your containerized applications on AWS. We can use simple API calls. We can launch and we can stop Docker-enabled applications. Okay, now that's only one of the features, one of the services that can do and can manage, can orchestrate containers. They have a few more, so that you can have something called, for example, EKS, right, for the container registry and for the container storage as well. So they have many, many more services if you're interested on containers. Okay, now let's go with the next one. Now let's talk about another service called AWS Lambda. As I mentioned before, you remember that Lambda is serverless. Okay, that means that now, of course, when we say serverless, of course, all the way on the back end, they have servers. But you as the customers, you don't own them, okay? You don't even see them. The only thing that you can do, or you can do, of course, many things, but the most important thing that you can do is that you can run code without provisioning or managing servers. If you have code, you can send the code to AWS and they can run the code for you. And you pay only for compute time while your code is running, and it can be used by other AWS services. Now, let me go back to my browser here so I can show you a few things that I have here for you. Some of those links are on your file that I gave you. But let me go with Lambda so you can see when I say code, what do I mean by code? For example, here it says, let me go and zoom in real quick. If you have Java, Go, PowerShell, Node, JS, C, Python, and Ruby code, instead of buying a server so you can run the code, you can say, you know what, let me get the code, let me upload the code to AWS, and let me run the code on AWS. And you only pay for, you pay by the second, okay? So if your code runs for, let's say, 5 seconds, you only pay for 5 seconds. So it's way cheaper than buying all the things needed so you can run the code on-prem. Okay, so those are the, let's say, Lambda codes that you can run on AWS. Okay, now when you go to any of the links I gave you, for example, when you go to the Lambda link, you can see they give you just like a brief description. They show you what you can do on the free tier. For example, you can go with 1 million requests every single month without paying for. And as I mentioned before, Lambda is serverless. Okay, that's the most important serverless feature that AWS has. Okay, and it can do many things for you. You can do file processing, stream processing, anything your code can do, web applications, IoT, mobile backends as well. Okay, and the example we have here, let's say we have a picture, right? And then we save that picture in an S3 bucket. We're going to get to S3 in just a few moments. We trigger Lambda, and Lambda, using the code that we created, it will resize your picture for you, and then it will create a different version of the picture based on your Lambda code. Okay, but just keep in mind that Lambda is for serverless. Okay. Okay. Now, let's talk about. Let's go and see another example for Lambda. Step 1, again, upload the code to Lambda. Set the code to trigger from an event source, and then the code runs only when triggered, and you pay only for the compute time you use in Lambda. Okay. Now, again, if you want to see more details, go to the links I gave you. Let me just go and zoom out here real quick. It shows you the features, it shows you the pricing, it shows you resources. And if at some point you want to get certified on AWS, then always check the FAQs. That's the most important thing you have to check if you want to get certified. It shows you what's AWS Lambda, what's serverless computing, what can trigger a Lambda function. So what should I use, Lambda versus EC2, for example? What kind of code can we run on Lambda, right? So that's the perfect way so you can get prepared and you can know more about one specific feature on AWS. Okay. Any questions, anyone so far? Okay. So let's keep going then. And now let's talk about storage. Okay. So when we talk about storage, you can go with many options. For example, you can go with S3, EBS, or EFS. Maybe most of you know, maybe you've heard about S3. And it's called S3 because S3 stands for Simple Storage Service. Okay. When we go with EBS, EBS stands for Elastic Block Store, and EFS stands for Elastic File System. So you can see they have many more elastic features and services. Let's go ahead and start with S3. S3, that's a cheap way that you can store your data. You are going to store your data, okay, in a bucket, okay? And when you store your data in a bucket, they will give you, let me type here, 11 nines, okay? So that means that it's almost impossible that when you save your data on an S3 bucket, your data will get lost. There is a chance, but it's just a very small chance that you might lose your data when you save that on S3. Now, as I mentioned before, you can go and you can open the free tier. You can start using free tier. The free tier also includes S3 as well. And we have so many use cases for S3, but mostly when we talk about S3, that means we use S3 for object-based storage, okay? And usually when we say object-based, it should be for inactive data, okay? Or static data as well. Why? Because when you go with S3, you have to pay for the data storage, okay? In fact, let me open another link I have here for you. Give me 1 sec so I can show you a few more details. Let me go and share now here this one with you. Give me 1 sec. Okay. Let me share my screen with you once again. And as you can see, S3, when you go to the S3 page, you can click on pricing and it will show you all the details about price. Now, S3 is one of the services that they have a different price based on the region. For example, let's go with the most common region, that's US East. Many customers are using US East. So if you go with S3, right, you are going to pay 2.3 cents. You can see it 2.3 cents per gigabyte a month for the first 50 terabytes. Okay. Now, if you go over 50 terabytes, the next 450 terabytes, you pay 2.2 cents. Okay. And then if you go over 500 terabytes, you pay 2.1 cents per gigabyte per month. Okay. Now, a few more interesting things about S3. Let me go and click on data transfer. Okay. It says you pay, let me zoom in so you can see that better. you pay for all the bandwidth into and out of S3 except for the following. Data transfer out, the first 100 gigs a month. Data transferred in, you pay nothing, right? And data transferred between S3 buckets in the same AWS region. So if you have two buckets within the same region, let's say US East, and you transfer data back and forth, you don't pay for that data transfer. But if you have an S3 bucket in India, for example, you are going to pay for the data transfer because you are using the AWS network, okay? So that's why you have to be careful with how much data you want to get out of your S3 bucket, okay? So for example, here it says data transfer in to S3 from the outside, you pay nothing, right? They want to get you into the cloud. Data transfer out to S3, let's say from S3 to the outside, and as you can see, the first 10 terabytes, you pay 9 cents per gig. That's in US East, okay? Let me show you another region. Let me go back to storage here. Let's go and choose, for example, let's go now with Sao Paulo, okay? Before I get to Sao Paulo, let's go back to US East so you can see what's the price. It says the first 50 terabytes, you pay 2.3 cents a gig, right? Now, let's go with Sao Paulo. Instead of 2.3 cents, you pay 4 cents. Why? Taxes, power, the government, things are more expensive in Sao Paulo. That's why you have to pay more. So that's why you have to be careful when you choose the region for your service. Some services, they have a different price based on the region. Some other ones, they have a price on the same price on any region that you use on AWS, okay? Any questions, anyone, about S3? Okay, let me go back to PowerPoint. Now, S3 has different tiers, okay? They have different tiers, and the one that most customers use, it's called S3 standard, okay? Now, what's standard? That means that, let's say we have a file, let's say we have here file 1, okay, let's go back with the file 1.txt, and I want to save my file within my bucket, okay? Once we set a file on the bucket, and those are some things that you don't see, you are going to get 3 copies of the same file. So AWS will save your file 3 times, 1 copy per AC. So they have your file on 3 different physical locations. If one location goes down, you can get the file, okay? You don't even know that, you don't even see that, but they give you the file from any other location that they have a copy of your file, okay? Now, they have another one called S3 standard, okay? And they have, it's called 1AC, okay? So instead of 3 copies, they give you have only 1 copy, okay? It's cheaper, but if that AC goes down, you won't be able to get your file, okay? Let me see if I can show you that real quick here on my browser. Okay, let me go back to, okay, and as you can see here, that 1AC, it's called S3 one zone, okay? And instead of paying, let me go back to US East here. If I go back to US East, instead of 2.3 cents, and you get 3 copies, if you go with the one zone in frequent access, you pay less than, it's like 1 cent, okay? So less than half of the price if you go with one zone. But they have more options. They have, for example, they have Glacier, that's for archiving. And as you can see, Glacier, they have different options. But if you go with S3 Deep Archive Glacier, okay, that might take some time to retrieve your data. You can see what's the price, okay? It's almost nothing. right? What you pay for every single gig you keep within Glacier. But that's data that you need to keep for, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, and you can wait a few hours to get your data back. But S3 gives you many, many options, and they have, for example, something called intelligent tiering. That means that if you save an object, a file on your bucket, and no one accesses that file for, let's say, 30 days, it moves to a cheaper tier. If they don't access that file for, let's say, 6 months, it can move to Glacier. Okay, so you can go and you can start using the intelligent tiering within S3. Okay, let me go back to PowerPoint. So that's S3, and S3 can be used to save your vacation pictures, to save your objects, so you can do a backup of your data, so you can back up your iPhone, or you can back up your computer, or you can back up your EC2 instance as well. So any object can be saved on that S3 bucket. And there is no maximum size for a bucket. You can keep adding more and more and more objects, but you have to pay for the number of, or the size of the objects, or the capacity that you're using on that S3 bucket. Okay. So if we see a few more details, it can store files in buckets. We have many use cases for S3, like the ones I mentioned. It can keep track of multiple variants of the same object through versioning. So you save the file, and then you make changes, so you can see the new changes, and you can see the original file as well. And it can prevent accidental object deletion. Now, when we talk about cloud, and this is important to mention, we need to be careful with, I'm going to type here, we have to be careful with security. So who can access your bucket? The type of access they have to your bucket. If I say, for example, open to the world, right? If they can access my bucket and they can erase, so my data is at risk, right? So you are in charge of the security. You have to choose who can access, and if they have access, the things they can do once they get to your bucket. And that's something that we are going to discuss once we get to module 3. We're going to talk about authentication and authorization as well. Okay, let's keep going, and let's go and see a few more details about AWS. And as you can see, now we're going to talk about something called EBS. And EBS stands for Elastic Block Store. Okay, now what's an EBS volume? That's the way that we can add storage to an EC2 instance. Okay, so if you need more storage on an EC2 instance, you can request, and you can pay, of course, once again, for an EBS, and you can add more storage to your EC2 instance. Now, when we talk about EBS, then we just make sure you can see my screen. Okay, yep, there you go. When we talk about EBS, they have different types. And let me just go to my browser once again, and let me show you the different EBS types. Okay, just give me one moment. Let me stop sharing here for a moment, and let me show you the different EBS volume types that you can get from AWS. Okay, so let me share now my screen with you. And as you can see, they have different types. That's another link that I gave you on the file. And as you can see, they show you that they have SSD volumes, okay, SSD-based volumes, and they have also HDD-based volumes. Of course, the pricing is different, the performance is way different, and that's the way you can see all the details about your about EBS. They have GP2, GP3, IO1. Let's go with GP2. That's the most common one. So as you can see, when you buy and you request a GP2, each volume, each EBS can be from 1 gigabyte to 16 terabytes. Okay, but for example, when you go with an IO2 Block Express, the volume size can be from 4 gigabytes to 64 terabytes, one volume. So for example, let's say we have here, let's say this is my EC2 instance, right? EC2, and let's say we have a Windows, I don't know, 2019, right? If I need more space than the space that we get by default, we can say, you know what? Let me create an EBS. Let's go with IO2, and let's go with, I don't know, 16 terabytes. And then we can attach that EBS to my EC2 Windows 2019, right? Now, do I need more than 16 terabytes? I can increase the size anytime, and I can go to 64 terabytes. Now, do I need more than 64 terabytes? And let's say this is my EBS. Let me just change the name here. Let's say this is my EBS1, right? Do I need more space on my Windows 2019? I can add another EBS, right? Let's say this is my EBS2, and now let's go with GP2, and now let's say we add 16 more terabytes. So now my EC2 instance has a connection to EBS volumes, okay? So you need more space, you can do that. The only thing you have to be careful with is that you cannot decrease the size of an EBS. You can increase the size anytime, but you cannot decrease the size of that EBS volume, okay? Now, what happens if I go and I erase, let's say we go and we erase that EC2 2019. I can keep those EBS volumes. I can keep my, in fact, I have a typo here. Let's say this is my EBS2, right? We can keep those EBS volumes. And then if you create another EC2 instance, okay, let's say this is my new Windows 2019 base VM, I can attach those EBS volumes into my new Windows server. Okay, so EBS volumes, they can be attached to only one EC2 instance, by the way. They cannot be attached to two instances, but I can erase, I can redeploy my instances, and then I can reattach those EBS volumes. EBS volumes, they are used for dynamic data. And that's one of the ways that we can compare, let's say, S3 with EBS. S3, as we mentioned before, it's for static data, okay, cold data, and EBS, it's for dynamic, or it's also known as hot data, or frequently access data, okay, for frequently access, okay? That's why you can go with EBS, okay? So let me go back to PowerPoint. And here are the different types of EBS volumes. Let me go full screen. You can see they have general purpose, SSDs, provision IOPS, SSDs. They have throughput optimized HDDs, and they have cold HDDs. Okay, it depends on the size. It depends on the type as well, what you have to pay. But again, it's way cheaper than buying a physical server and buying drives that we can attach to that server as well. Okay, that's EBS. So we have another example here. We have the EC2 instance. We attach an EBS. Then we have another EC2 instance with two EBS volumes. If I need to at some point, I can say, you know what, I don't need to access that EBS from that EC2 instance anymore. And then if I want to, I can attach to my EC2 instance one. Okay, again, one EBS can be attached to only one EC2 instance at the same time. Okay, but that's EBS, and once again, it stands for Elastic Block Store, and once again, it's for block storage. Okay, so if we make a quick review before we move on, S3 is going to be for objects storage. EBS is going to be for block. Okay, and once again, when we say object, that means for static data, and when we say block, we say dynamic data. Those are differences between S3, and EBS. Now, EC2 instances, if we want to, we can take a backup. We can take a snapshot of that EC2 instance. If we take a backup, if you want to back up your EC2 instances, that backup, okay, your backup can go to an S3 bucket. Okay, so we use S3 buckets so we can keep backups of EC2 instances. Okay. Now, let's go with the next one. And now let's talk about something called EFS, another elastic service. And EFS, that's the way that you can start using exports. Okay. That means that EFS, that's the way that you can, let's say, deploy, you can request space for and can be accessed by NFS v4 and NFS v41. Maybe some of you know NFS, right? That's the way that you can export and then you can mount. Instead of having a Unix file server or an on-prem file server, right? You can request the space from the cloud. And then instead of mounting to an on-prem server, you are going to mount to the cloud, okay? So it's simple, scalable, fully managed file system that can be accessed through NFS v4 and v41. It can scale on demand to petabytes. Okay, when we say on-prem, we need to know what's the capacity of our on-prem system, right? It can be a few terabytes, right? But when you go with cloud, you can say, I need 5 petabytes, and they will give you 5 petabytes right away. Okay, you have to pay again for those 5 petabytes, but they will give you those 5 petabytes right away. And EFS, by the way, it will store data within and across multiple ACs. So that means that they will protect your data, and your data will always be available, okay? But that's the way that you can go and you can mount using NFS v4, and you can mount your elastic file system, okay? Now, if you have Windows, then you cannot go with EFS, but you can go with something called FSX, okay? So FSX, that's the way you can create a share within AWS, and then you can map the share to the cloud, okay? So EFS, FSX, that's the way that you can extend your on-prem NAS, or you can replace your on-prem NAS. You can do that. You can extend or you can replace. Okay. Now, I mentioned many times the cost, right? And some of you might say, yeah, it's not that easy to identify the cost. But if I go and I show you the file that we are going to share, or that you should have right now, under module 1, there is something called AWS pricing calculator. Okay, so if you click on that link, I'm just going to click on that link, and now let me share my screen here with you. That's the way you can create an estimate. For example, let me go and click on create estimate. Okay, and let me go with, just make sure you can see my screen. Yeah, perfect. And let me go with EFS. Okay, let me click on configure, and then you can see that you have to choose a region. Let's go with North Virginia, right? I can choose standard or one zone storage. So 1 copy or 3 copies. And then enter the amounts. Let's go and make things interesting. Let's go with terabytes. And let's go and say we need 10 terabytes a month. Okay, if I go all the way down, it shows me that for 10 terabytes a month, I have to pay $819.20 US. Okay, now let's go and make things more interesting. Let's go and say 1,000 terabytes a month, 81,000, right? But that's 1 petabyte. Let's add more. Let's add a few more zeros. And you can see that they don't give you any warnings here. You can request more and more and more storage. Of course, you have to pay for that, okay? Now, if we do, now let's go with an estimate. Let me go back to the home page here. Let me create an estimate now for S3. Okay, let me click on configure. I have to choose the tier, right? Let's go with standard. And let's say we are going to be using, I don't know, let's say 5 terabytes a month. So how much do you have to pay for 5 terabytes a month? 117 US. Okay. Now, how much do you have to pay if you want or if you need 5 terabytes and you need to buy a hard drive? Now, what's the huge difference? When you buy a hard drive on Amazon or Best Buy, you only get 1 copy. And if that drive goes down, it goes bad, your data, your pictures are gone. So they charge for the protection as well. Okay. And then you can add more details, how many requests, the type of requests, okay? And then it will give you an estimate on how much you have to pay by month, okay? Now, those estimates, they can be created for, now let me go with databases. You can host your database in the cloud. A MySQL, an Oracle database, MariaDB as well, PostgreSQL as well, and then before you move to the cloud, see if it makes sense to move to the cloud. See what you can save if you move to the cloud. And that's why I gave that link so you can create an estimate and you can see how much you might be paying if you move to the cloud. Let's say we go with a MySQL database, right? So they ask a few details. So how much space do you need? Let's go with GP2 and let's go with 30 gigs a month. And then we might be using an EC2 instance called DB-M1 large. Okay, so if you go with 30 gigs a month, then at the end you have to pay for 342 US, right? So you are paying for the let's say instance, and you are paying for the storage. Okay, if you need more space, let's say we go with I don't know, let's say 300 gigabytes. Okay, then you can see it's something not we don't have a big increase, right? So that's the way you can check and you can see how much it will cost if you move to the cloud. Okay. Now let's go back to storage. So when we talk about EFS, we can dynamically increase the size. It will be a shared file storage and it will be cost effective. Now, when we compare the let's say cost of having on-prem and cloud, you need to consider many things, right? As I mentioned before, the power, cooling, rent, tech support, licenses. And when you compare all those things to your cloud costs, trust me, you are going to see a huge, huge difference. So in the long term, short and long term, it makes a huge difference when you go to cloud storage. So let's move on now to databases. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we can do so many things with cloud. Now let's talk about databases. And when we go with databases, they have, and let's go with 3 important things that you can get from the cloud. You can go with RDS, DynamoDB, or you can go with something called the AWS Database Migration Service, or DMS. So they will give you tools so you can migrate your database from on-prem to cloud if that's the case. Okay, now when we go with RDS, they have, let me go forward here so you can see more details about RDS. When we say RDS, that means that they give you different database engines. You can see the ones I showed you. It can be SQL, it can be PostgreSQL, Oracle, MariaDB as well. Okay, so they have many engines that you can deploy and you can start using in the cloud. Now, when we go with RDS, we are going to be using EC2 instances to host your database. Okay, you can choose the instance type, and as we've seen, based on the instance type, they will give you resources for that EC2 instance. Okay, so that means that we have the database, we have the instance, and we are paying for both at the same time. Okay, but RDS, it can automate the time-consuming admin tasks. It's secure and compatible with your existing databases, and it's easy to administer. Okay, so now you can host and you can migrate your database to the cloud. Okay, and those are the databases that can be hosted. Some of the databases can be hosted on AWS. Now, when we say RDS, it's usually something that complies with SQL. Okay, so any SQL related database, you can see we have here PostgreSQL, MySQL, SQL Server, right? And that's known as a relational database. Okay, now another interesting database type, it's called, well, let's go into a few more details about RDS before we move on. So we have the multi-AC deployments. So we have built-in automated failover. We have HA, and we can rely on that database. And if you want to, you can use read replicas for heavy read database workloads. Okay, so you can have multiple replicas of your database, and then we can use those replicas so we can let's say, read from those replicas instead of from the source database. Okay, that's RDS. So we have, once again, built-in protection, built-in failover, HA, reliability as well, and read replicas. Those are some of the features of RDS. Now, the next one, and in my opinion, I think that's one of the most interesting features that we get from AWS. It's called DynamoDB. Okay, DynamoDB, it's a NoSQL database, okay, and it's also serverless. So you don't need to manage, you don't need to pay, you don't need to use EC2 instances. You just need to go and deploy your database. You have to choose the capacity and the performance that you need for your database, and you can request as much space as you need for your Dynamo database. Dynamo, it will give you a single-digit millisecond performance at any scale. It can be deployed worldwide, no servers to manage, and it's fast and flexible. So you can store any documents, any keys, anything you need to have on your database, okay? That's the one that it's being used, one of the databases that Amazon uses for the online store. For example, when you have things in your card, all those entries, all those, let's say, assets or things you want to buy are saved on that DynamoDB. So that means that when you open your Amazon app or you go to the Amazon website and you click on My Card, okay, everything you save there, it's because it's saved on DynamoDB. And that's why you can see all those things very, very easy. For example, when you go with online games as well, okay, the game state and all the features of that game, they will be saved on DynamoDB, okay? And if you want to make things faster, you can add a DynamoDB cache, for example, so you can make that experience way, way faster. But again, the most important thing about Dynamo is that it's serverless and it will give you as much storage as you need. There's no maximum storage that we can request and we can use from that DynamoDB, okay? Some use cases for Dynamo serverless web applications, your phones, your tablets, many applications that we know they use DynamoDB. Again, Amazon, it uses DynamoDB, gaming, and then Internet of Things that it's known as IoT. Okay. Now, as I mentioned before, there's a way that you can migrate your database from on-prem to AWS. And that's something that we can do with DMS. You don't pay for that DMS service. You pay, you start paying once you deploy, once you migrate your database to the cloud, then you start paying for the resources we need on that database, right? So we can do that very easy and fast. We can migrate data to and from most widely used databases, and you can maintain full operation of source databases during your migration. Okay, so if you want to know more about DMS, please go and check the file that you should have by now, and there's a link so you can see more details about DMS. Okay, now let's go with another interesting topic, and let's talk about networking and content delivery. So when we start using AWS, then we need to know some basics about some other concepts, like, for example, VPC, Route 53, Direct Connect, and also CloudFront. Let's go step by step so I can show you some more details about those 4 different concepts. And let's go ahead and start with VPC. A VPC, as you can see, VPC stands for Virtual Private Cloud. A VPC, it's like a data center in the cloud. Okay? For example, how many data centers your company has? Let's say 4. Okay? They have one in, I don't know, let's say again, India, one in the US, one in Japan, and one in Australia. Okay? So when you move to the cloud, you can also create multiple sites within your account, and that's called VPC. And by default, you can have 5 VPCs per region, per account. If you need more, you can request more. But again, by default, you can have 5 VPCs per region, per account. Again, a VPC, it's like a data center in the cloud. That's the way that we can isolate solutions, storage, EC2 instances, databases, okay, within one VPC. So for example, if we have, let's say we have US and we have India as well, okay? So if I go in the US, I can select my VPC 1, and then we have an EC2 instance 1 that will be for HR. And then in India, we have a VPC 2 with, let's say, 4 EC2 instances that we use for IT, for example. So we try to get the resources close to the end users, okay? Now, if I need more than one VPC in US East, let's say here, let's say US East, I can create up to 5 by default, okay? But that's the way you can create a virtual network, a virtual site within AWS. So that's why here it says we can launch resources in that virtual network that you define. We have complete control over that network environment, and then we can create subnets so we can leverage multiple layers of security. Okay. Now, let me give you an example of a VPC. Let's say this is my VPC 1, okay, and I deploy my VPC 1 in US East 1, okay. Now, within my VPC 1, we create 2 subnets. Okay, that's the way we can divide. Okay, we can subdivide the VPC. Let's say we have a subnet 1, and then we have here a subnet 2. And let's say that my subnet 1, it's a public subnet, and my subnet 2, it's a private subnet. On my public subnet, I have my web server, and on my private subnet, I have my database server. Okay, so anyone, if I want to, if I give them access, anyone can access my public subnet. Okay, like for example, my customers. If we have a website, they should be able to access my web server, and they should be able to access that web page, right? Now, we deploy the database server on subnet 2, and then we have a connection between the web server and the database server, so we can save all the things that we create from that web server, okay? So the way you can divide your VPC is with multiple subnets, and you can deploy many solutions in a public or a private subnet. Now, once again, the security, it depends, or that's something that it's on your side. Who can access my VPC? You can decide that. Who can access my subnet? Well, it depends if it's public or if it's private. If it's public, anyone from outside my VPC. If it's private, only users within my company. Okay, only users that they have a VPN into my VPC, for example. Okay, so that's the way we can subdivide. We can divide the VPC into multiple segments. Okay, now, when we go with the VPC, we can quickly and easily begin working with the default VPC. You get one VPC by default when you create your AWS account. We can use other services with the default VPC, and we can benefit from advanced networking features. It's like, again, like a network that you can deploy in the cloud. Now, when we create a VPC, we have to decide and we have to configure something called the CIDR range. That means the IP range that we have and we can use within that VPC, okay? If you are interested on CIDR, I gave you a link on that file that I mentioned like 50 times now, that it's called CIDR.xyz, okay? And that's a CIDR, that's the way you can see IPs that we can use for VPCs, okay? Now, this is just a quick overview on many AWS solutions. If you want to go deeper, we have more training for you. I will show you the recommended training once we finish the Discovery Day, so you can learn more and you can get certified on AWS, okay? So we have an example here. You can see we have AWS, right? We have the VPC. We have to choose a region for the VPC. And then you can see we have the public subnet, we have the private subnet, and we have instances. As I mentioned before, when we create a public subnet, that means that they can be, or they should be able to, we should be able to access them from the outside, right? If we create a private subnet, maybe they should be only available for users within my company, okay? Again, you can see we have the IP range for the VPC, and that's the way that we can deploy many, many resources, and we can create, once again, a virtual data center or a virtual network within AWS. Any questions, anyone so far? Okay, now, let's go and talk about Route 53. So Route 53, that's the AWS DNS service. Why it's called Route 53? Some of you, if you are IT guys and gals, right? You know that the DNS port, it's port 53, right? That's why it's called Route 53, and that's the AWS DNS service. That's the one, that service, that's the one that can translate domain names to IP addresses. It can connect user requests to infrastructures within and outside of AWS, and it can route traffic to healthy endpoints as well. You can buy a website. You can buy your website domain from Route 53 as well, and that's the way that AWS is translating domain names to IP addresses. So it's a worldwide service, and with Route 53, you can transfer DNS records for existing domain names. You can register new domain names as well, and you can ensure a high level of availability with multiple name servers as well. That's why, again, it's called Route 53, because that's the DNS port 53. Okay. Now we have an example here. Let's go deeper so we can see more things that we can do. Let's say we have an end user, right? And they want to access a subdomain.example.com website. So it goes and looks for that website on the DNS. And then using Route 53, they will route their request into an EC2 instance, because that's the one that it's hosting, for example, here, the web server. And that should happen very, very fast. Okay? So that's one of the use cases for Route 53. Now, let's go with something called Direct Connect. In fact, let me go back a few slides, and let me show you a few more details using that slide we have here. So when let's say we have an instance and we need to access that instance from the outside, that means that we can have, for example, here a public IP, and we can use that public IP so we can access that instance. It can be an HTTP. Let me type a few things here. It can be HTTP or HTTPS, or it can be RDP, or it can be SSH, or it can be any protocol that you want, and you are connected to the public IP. Now, when we deploy an instance in the private subnet, that private subnet has no public IPs, and they only have private IPs. Okay? How can we get to those private IPs from the outside, from the corporate data center? Some things that we can do is that we can create a VPN connection, or we can have a dedicated connection between AWS and your corporate data center. Okay, so it can be VPN based, or it can be a dedicated connection. Now, the dedicated connection, okay, let me go and type here. The dedicated connection, it's called Direct Connect. That's the name they use for the dedicated connection. Okay, so if you want to have a dedicated connection between your VPCs and your on-prem network, you can go with VPN, or you can go with Direct Connect. It's way cheaper, VPN, but it's way better, way more secure, and way faster if you go with a dedicated connection. Okay, so now let me go forward here. So with Direct Connect, you can reduce the network cost, you can increase the bandwidth and throughput, and that's the way you can partition the connection into multiple virtual interfaces. Okay, but once again, that's the dedicated connection. That's the name of the dedicated connection between your side and AWS. Okay. Any questions, anyone so far? Okay, so let's go with the next. Now, anytime you have any questions, use the Q&A section, please, and I will answer the questions right away. If I get no questions, I just keep going with lecture. Okay, so let's go now with CloudFront. CloudFront is the CDN service. What's CDN? CDN stands for Content Delivery Network. Okay, network. Okay, there you go. What's the meaning of Content Delivery Network? That means that that's the network that AWS has worldwide, so they can give, or they can serve data to any user anywhere worldwide. Let's go back to the example I was explaining you before. Let's go back to Netflix, right? Anyone worldwide with an internet connection, they should get access to any movie or any episode, right? That's done by the Content Delivery Network. For example, as I mentioned before, if we go and we place the episode 1 in an S3 bucket in US East, and they request the episode in Australia, using the CDN, they will move a copy close to Australia, and they will give that user a copy of that episode. Okay, that's done with the CDN. So that means that AWS has a connection between all the sites they have, and that connection is done using satellite, but also using submarine cables. And that's done by many companies. Okay. Now, if some of you need to know more about the submarine cables, let me show you one interesting thing that I have that I also added to the file that I will share with you. Let me go and share my browser once again with you. Give me one sec. Let me find that. I think it's here. Yep, it's here. So there's some interesting link that shows you all the submarine cables that are deployed worldwide. Okay, that's the way that we have communication between America, Europe, Asia, Africa, right? Using those submarine cables. Those are huge cables. You can go to YouTube and you can see more videos about those cables. Let me just go and pick one cable here. For example, let me click on that cap one. And if I click on that cable that it's between US East and Asia here, it shows you, for example, that the cap one, it shows you the length, 12,000 kilometers. The owners, AWS and Facebook as well. So that cable, it's used by two different companies so they can move data. And those are high-speed cables, expensive cables, and they have a great protection. So if you're interested on getting more details about the submarine cables, go and open the file I gave you. Let me show you where's that link. Let me go to the file here, and that link should be under networking. Okay, so under networking, just click on the submarine cable map, and you should be able to see. So when you get some free time, just go and see all the cables that they are deployed worldwide. Now, one of the biggest cable that you can find worldwide, let me just click on this one here. Okay, it's called SEAMEWE. That's Southeast Asia, Middle East, West Europe, and that it's a 39,000 kilometer cable, and it connects, as you can see, many different countries. Okay, and you can see the companies that use the cable, right? And you can see all the landing ports. You can see China, Australia, Egypt, Indonesia, right? Singapore, right? So that's the way we have connection. If you thought it was on satellite connections are way too expensive. Okay, and it's way cheaper to deploy cables worldwide. Okay, so that's the way that AWS and many other companies, they have connection between those different sites. Okay, let me go back to PowerPoint. So that's the way, and I was showing you that because that's the way they create the CDN, the Content Delivery Network. That's the way they can deliver content to customers on any location worldwide, right? It seamlessly integrates with any AWS services and incurs no charges for data transfer between AWS origins and the cloud front as well. Okay. So when you want to use CloudFront, you have no minimum commitments. You pay only for what you use, just like any other service. And you can see we have a few use cases. We have asset caching, like a website. It can be video streaming, or it can be software distribution. Okay, those are some of the use cases for Amazon CloudFront. So, for example, here the same thing I was saying before. We have a movie saved on an S3 bucket, and we have that movie saved in South America, right? If we have a user in Russia or India, right, that they want to access that movie, instead of, let's say, moving that movie to Europe, we create a copy and we save that copy in that edge location, and we save that copy in cache. So if any other users, they want to access the same movie, instead of going to South America, they can read that movie, they can access that movie or that file from that edge and that cache location as well. Okay, that's CloudFront. As you can see, it says which AWS service distributes traffic across multiple resources and ACs, and the correct answer is the elastic load balancer. Okay, so 7 of you answered correctly. That's the answer. Okay, let's go now with the second question. And the second question says true or false, right? Amazon EC2 is a service that provides highly scalable, high performance container orchestration. And guess what? The answer is false. Okay, EC2, it's for VMs, not for containers. Okay, for containers, it's ECS. Okay, be careful with the acronyms. You have to get used to it. Okay, but EC2, it's for VMs, and ECS, that's for containers. Okay, so most of you have that wrong. Okay, next one, Number 3, so which AWS service is the best option to use if you need high performance log storage? And most of you are right, that's EBS. Okay, perfect. Only one of you answered EC2. Perfect. Yep. Next one, true or false? EFS can only store data within an AC, and the answer is false. Perfect. Most of you had that one right. And then the next one, which AWS service is the best option to use if you need a NoSQL database that is serverless? And of course, the answer is DynamoDB. Perfect. Yep. The next one, let me see. So which AWS database service supports multiple database engines, including MySQL and PostgreSQL, and that's RDS. Perfect. So 5 of you have the correct answer. And then the next one, if I'm going too fast, let me know. Okay, but I'm just trying to show you the answers. So which of the following AWS services is highly available and scalable DNS web service? And of course, that's Route 53. Every time you see DNS, that's Route 53. Okay. And the last one, so which AWS service is a fast content delivery network? And that, of course, is CloudFront. Okay. So those are the answers to the questions. Okay. Okay, so we have a question on the Q&A section. Can I enroll in your training program without any bootcamp affiliation? Yes, you can do that. In fact, we have a few discounts, so you can get trained on AWS. So let's go with Module 3. And now let's talk about security and compliance. Now, this is just, as you can see here, this is just a quick overview. Security and compliance, it's one of the main topics that we need to know and we need to learn when we go to cloud. And we're going to talk about security. We're going to talk about who's responsible when something fails, or when we lose data, or we have a security breach as well. We're going to see on a very fast way some security services, and then we talk about compliance. Okay, so let's go and start with security. So what's security? So of course, most of you and many customers, when they think about cloud, one of the major concerns is security, right? But as I mentioned before, the cloud gives you all the tools needed so you can secure your access to the cloud. So you can choose who can access, the things they can do, if they can audit as well. Okay, so we have many things that we can configure when we are talking about security. So let's talk about the shared responsibility that we have, or AWS has with their customers. So who's responsible if something breaks, or if we have a security concern, or we have a security breach? Well, it depends, right? When you go with AWS, they give you many services that we mentioned before, like compute, storage, database, and network. And they have, as we've seen, multiple regions, AZs, and edge locations. Now, on the customer side, you are going to be responsible for your customer data, for your applications, for something called identity and access management. That means that you have to configure and you have to customize who can access your cloud resources. If you have any operating systems, any firewalls, your network, that's something you have to be careful and you have to be responsible for, as much as data encryption on the client side, on the server side, or encryption on the network. Okay, so AWS will be responsible for many things, like their own data center security, who can access data center, service packs, updates, patches, any physical components that might fail. They will be responsible for fixing that and replacing any components that need to be replaced at some point. Okay, now let's go and see a few more details on the customer side. As you can see, we talk about security in the cloud. So for example, when you deploy an instance, you have to be careful and you need to check the instance operating system, right? Your application that you deploy within that instance, and you have to specify different security groups, the operating system, the host-based firewalls, the network configuration, and the account management. So as I mentioned before, you are responsible for many things when you start using cloud. Now, if you go serverless, you can't forget about the OS, the firewalls, the network configuration. You are responsible for your data and how you want to protect your data. And that's why we have to choose between instances, servers, operating systems, or once again, you can go serverless. Once again, serverless means that you don't own any servers, you don't manage any servers, and you don't need to take care of any servers that are used for that serverless deployment. Okay. Now, let's talk about security of the cloud. When we talk about security of the cloud, and that's on AWS, they need to be careful and they keep track, and they have they are responsible for the physical security of data centers, for any physical or logical components they have and they give you and they charge for, right? For the network and for virtualization as well. And as you can see, we have many services that we mentioned back again today. Any questions, anyone so far? Okay, now let's go and talk about some security services. As you can see, and in my opinion also, one of the most important ones is identity and access management. That's called, or that's known as IAM. Who can access and things they can do once they access. We're going to see more details on IAM. But also they have detective controls. They have infrastructure protection, data protection, and compliance. As I said before, security and compliance, it's a huge, huge topic. That's why we only mention here, for example, when we go with identity and access management, we just want to mention some things that can be enabled, some services that can be used that you can deploy on AWS. For example, single sign-on. Maybe some of you know what single sign-on. If you have multiple applications, multiple servers, and you want to use only one account to access all of them, that can be done with single sign-on. There's something called Secrets Manager. Secrets Manager, that's the way that you can centralize your secrets, your passwords, and then we can retrieve them from that secure location. We have IAM for identity and access management. We have directory service for Windows Active Directory, and also an interesting one, it's called Cognito. Maybe some of you have seen that when you download an app and you need to see the services or you want to buy something, sometimes they ask you to log in, right? And they give you many options. You can log in with Facebook, you can log in with your Google account, you can log in with your Twitter account, right? That's something that is done by Cognito. Okay, so if you create your own app and you want to give the users many options so they can log in, then you are going to be using Amazon Cognito, right? So those are some of the tools that AWS can give you on their identity and access management. Now, on detective controls, they have the Security Hub, they have Guard Duty, they have Inspector, and they have Amazon Macie. Okay. Now, on their infrastructure protection, they have Shield, they have Application Firewall, and they have an AWS Firewall Manager as well. So if you have multiple firewalls now, again, we don't go pretty deep on many of the solutions. If you check the file that we gave you, and let me go back to that file, give me 1 second here. On that file that I gave you, that I created for you, you can see that under module 3, it shows you a few interesting links, like for example, the directory service, that's the AD.
If you want to go with, for example, IAM, that's Identity and Access Management, Secrets Manager, Single Sign-On, Detective for security issues or suspicious activities, the Security Hub for security checks and alerts, Guard Duty for threat detection, Inspector for vulnerability management, NACI for sensitive data discovery and protection, Shield for DDoS protection, the Web Firewall, the Firewall Manager, and a few more like KMS, HSM, and Certificate Manager. So I give you some details on that file that we shared with you, so you can see if you want to go deeper, you can get more information about those different AWS solutions. Let me go to the Q&A section real quick here. Okay, I will show you, Matthew, some details about the trainings that we have. The cloud practitioner, it's a one-day training, and we show you a few more details than today. Okay, the one I recommend, it can be the cloud practitioner, it's 1 day, or it can be the solutions architect, that it's 3 days. Okay, but I will show you that in just a few moments. Okay, let me go back to PowerPoint. Okay, so Shield for DDoS protection, Web Application Firewall or WAF, and then we have the Firewall Manager, and then a few more, KMS for encryption keys, HSM also for saving and keeping encryption keys as well, and then we have the AWS Cert Manager. So it can manage your SSL and TLS certs for you. Okay, so many options that you can get from AWS. The last one we have here, that's Artifacts. That's for compliance. So you can see compliance reports. It can audit and give you compliance reports based on PCI, HIPAA as well. I will show you a few more details about AWS Artifact. Okay, so let's go and start with IAM. So when we talk about IAM, you can see that IAM stands for Identity and Access Management, right? So that's the way we can control access to the resources and services within AWS. And that's something we can do with IAM policies, okay? And by default, okay, AWS has more than 600 policies created that can be used at any time, okay? Let me change that here. So 600 plus policies are created, okay, that can be used for IAM. Now, you can create your own policies if you want to as well, okay? Or you can use the ones that they have created by default. Now, with IAM, we can create and manage users and groups. We can enable the multi-factor authentication. Maybe most of you know that it's recommended that every time that you see that your application, computer, email, cloud supports MFA, it's recommended that you enable MFA. Okay, so you have 2 different ways to authenticate and guarantee that the one that it's trying to access, it's somewhat authorized, and AWS supports MFA at no extra cost. Okay, so you can enable a multi-factor authentication to access your cloud resources as well. Okay, now when we go with IAM users, that's the way that I can give you access, or you can give access to anyone that wants to access or needs to access a cloud resource. It can be a person, or it can be an application, like an application on your phone, for example, and that needs to interact with AWS. And new users, they have no permissions by default. And again, we assign those permissions using IAM policies. Okay, now let's go past users and let's talk about groups. So a group, it's a collection of IAM users. You can easily manage permissions for multiple users at once, and a user can be in multiple groups if you want to as well. Okay, those are some details on IAM. So let's go and see a quick example. Let's say we create an account. As I mentioned, you don't have to pay for the account, and you get access to the free tier for 12 months. Okay. Now, once you create your account, let's say that you go and you create 2 groups, one for the admins, one for Q&A. And then let's say we have 4 different users. 2 of them are admins, and 2 of them, they belong to QA. Okay, it's that easy. Now, that's a pretty easy example. Okay, now, if you want to go deeper and you need more users and more accounts and more departments, there is something called AWS organizations. Okay, and then you can go way, way bigger and deeper, and you can add many more users, and you can manage multiple departments within your but this is just kind of basic on IAM. That's the way we can create accounts, users, passwords, so we can give them access into the AWS services. Okay, and that's something, once again, that we can do with IAM policies. And as I mentioned, by default, okay, by default, we have 600 plus policies that can be used by AWS customers. Okay, and a policy, that's the way that we can define the permission within AWS. We can deny specific actions, and best practice follow the principle of least privilege. That means that start with a few things they can do and then keep adding more things instead of giving them permission to everything and then getting some things out of that policy. Okay, so start simple, start on a restrictive way, and then keep adding more permissions into your users. And as I mentioned before, you can go with an MFA. I have that MFA to access my console. Again, no extra cost for using MFA, and you can download an app, you can get a token, and you can add more security so you can access your AWS account and your AWS resources as well. Finally, we're almost done. We have artifacts. That's the way that you can get compliance reports. You can review, you can accept, you can manage agreements with AWS, and you can access compliance reports from third-party vendors. Okay? Some of those reports or compliance reports, they can be HIPAA, ISO, FIPS, PCI, CSA, right? HITRUST, GDPR as well. So with Artifact, we can see, we can gather, and we can show you compliance reports. Okay. Any questions, anyone so far? We're almost done. It's now 1:40 p.m. I want to show you a few more things before you go. But we have the knowledge check here, and let me start that poll. Let's see if I can do that here.
There you go. I got it up.
Okay, there we go.
Yep. And again, it's 2 questions. So you should see both and just click the correct radial button on the left and then make sure you click submit at the bottom.
Now, question 1 has more than one answer. So just pick one, and then I will show you all the details about that question. Again, question 1 has more than one answer, but let's see I will show you the answers in just a few moments. Okay, so let me show you the answer. So let's see who's responsible, right? Let me end the poll and stop sharing now here. Okay, there you go. So for example, who's responsible for configuring the security group rules that determine which ports are open on the EC2 instance? And that it's done by the customer. Okay, so when you deploy an EC2 instance, you have to configure who can access and the ports that you have open on your EC2 instance. Okay, now let's go with the second one here. Prevent packet sniffing at the hypervisor level. We as customers, we don't have access to the hypervisor on AWS. So that's something that is done by AWS. Okay, we can access the EC2 instances, but there's no way we can go past the EC2 and we cannot see the hyper. Okay, next one. Patching the OS with the latest security patches. That's your responsibility, right? That's done by the customer. Shredding disks before they leave a data center. That's done by AWS, right? Securing the internal network inside the AWS data centers. That's done by AWS, right? There's nothing you need to do on that side. And then installing camera systems so we can check, so they can check the physical data centers. That's done by AWS as well. Okay. And toggling on the server-side encryption feature on S3. If you want to go with encryption, fine, you can do that. If you want to go without encryption, that's also okay, but that's on your side. So the ones you can see on, let's say, orange, okay, that's done by AWS. The ones you can see under gray, that's your responsibility as a customer, okay? Now, question 2, within your AWS account, you must create all of your IAM policies initially, and the answer is false. Why do we have that as false? As I mentioned before, we have, or AWS has, more than 600 policies created by default. Okay, so you don't have to create them. You don't need to create, you need to use them, right? But you don't have to create them. So we have to be careful with the syntax of the question, but you don't have to create your IAM policies. Okay. So key takeaways, we've seen some security services. Security, it's going to be shared between customers and AWS. And then we've seen that we have on-demand access to compliance reports if we go with AWS Artifact. Okay, and that's all we have on that third lecture. Now, before I give you a few more minutes for Q&A, let's go back to the file that we shared with you. And if you open that file once again, all the way down, we show you, we have a few links for you, certification and training. You can see more details about the AWS certification. If I click on that link I have here on AWS certification, let me go and share my screen here with you. Okay, it's this one here. This is the way that you can see all the certs that AWS has. So for example, if you take the one-day course, the Cloud Practitioner course, you can get certified as Cloud Practitioner, and that's the foundation, okay? My recommendation, go and take the Solutions Architect Associate, okay? That should be the best way to go from now. So you can go with the foundational cert, or you can go with the associate cert. I recommend that you go with associate cert, and you go with the Solutions Architect course. Right now, and if I go back to the file that I shared with you, if you go all the way down, I have one that it says recommended courses after the AWS Discovery Day. Cloud Practitioner, 1 day, and the Solutions Architect, that's 3 days. And you can enroll, if I click on that link I have here, in fact, it's this one here, okay? You can enroll on the AWS Certified Solutions Architect Associate course. You get the exam bundle as well. And right now, there's you can save 30% if you enroll before January 15th. Okay, so that's what I can recommend if you want to get started on AWS. If you want to learn more about cloud, we have many more courses. But if you have no experience on cloud, I would recommend that you go with the Solutions Architect course and the Solutions Architect certification. Okay. Any questions, anyone? Okay, so we have a few more minutes. If anyone has any other questions, if you have no more questions, that's all we have on this Discovery Day for you. I hope you enjoyed the 3-hour training. I hope you feel more confident now, and you can see how powerful the cloud is, and how easy we can deploy and we can request resources from AWS. Okay, so thank you for being here. Let me go and type my email on the screen just in case anyone has any other questions. And let me copy and paste that into the chat as well. Okay, let me just copy and paste on the chat. So you can send me an email anytime if you have any other questions. Go ahead, just send me an email, and I hope to see you on an AWS training in the near future. Okay, thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining. You can also always visit our website, quickstart.com, at any time, and you can see the complete listing of courses there. We're getting a lot of thank yous in the Q&A. So again, thank you so much for joining today, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Hector.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.